Welcome to the appendix, where we read the primary sources of the past so the present can be better understood. Today's primary source, the Jay Treaty, November 19, 1794, as found in Treaties, Conventions, etc., Volume 1, page 590. Contrary to the provisions of the Treaty of 1783, Great Britain had retained control of the Northwest posts and had failed to make any compensation for slaves carried away during the Revolution. In addition to these grievances of old standing, there were more recent ones arising from interference with the neutral trade. War seemed imminent in 1794, when Washington nominated Chief Justice John Jay as envoy extraordinary to conclude a treaty of peace and commerce. The Jay Treaty solved some of the most important matters of dispute between the two nations and averted war, but it contained certain features profoundly unsatisfactory to the majority of Americans. Washington hesitated some time before sending it to the Senate for ratification. After a bitter contest in the Senate, the treaty was ratified June 24, 1795, with a reservation which suspended the obnoxious Article XII. The question of appropriations for carrying out the provisions of the treaty raised a serious constitutional problem in the House. The appropriations were finally made, but only after one of the greatest political debates in American history. Article 1. There shall be a firm, inviolable, and universal peace, and a true and sincere friendship between His Britannic Majesty, his heirs and successors, and the United States of America, and between their respective countries, territories, cities, towns, and people of every degree, without exception of persons or places. Article 2. His Majesty will withdraw all his troops and garrisons from all posts and places within the boundary lines assigned by the Treaty of Peace to the United States. This evacuation shall take place on or before June 1, 1796. The United States, in the meantime, at their discretion, extending their settlements to any part within the said boundary line, except within the precincts or jurisdictions of any of the said posts. All settlers and traders within the precincts or jurisdictions of the said post shall continue to enjoy, unmolested, all the property of every kind, and shall be protected therein. They shall be at full liberty to remain there, or to remove with all or any part of their effects, and shall also be free to them to sell their lands, houses, or effects, or to retain the property thereof, at their discretion. Such of them as shall continue to reside within the said boundary lines shall not be compelled to become citizens of the United States, or to take any oath of allegiance to the government thereof, but they shall be at full liberty so to do if they think proper, and they shall make and declare their election within 1 year after the evacuation aforesaid. And all persons who shall continue there after the expiration of the said year, without having declared their intention of remaining subjects of His Britannic Majesty, shall be considered as having elected to become citizens of the United States. Article 3. It is agreed that it shall at all times be free to His Majesty's subjects and to the citizens of the United States, and also to the Indians dwelling on either side of the said boundary line, freely to pass and repass by land or inland navigation into the respective territories and countries of the two parties on the continent of America, the country within the limits of the Hudson Bay Company only excepted, and to navigate all the lakes, rivers, and waters thereof, and freely to carry on trade and commerce with each other. The river Mississippi shall, however, according to the Treaty of Peace, be entirely open to both parties, and it is further agreed that all the ports and places on its eastern side, to whichsoever of the parties belonging, may freely be resorted to and used by both parties in as ample a manner as any of the Atlantic ports or places of the United States, or any of the ports or places of His Majesty in Great Britain. Article 4. Whereas it is uncertain whether the river Mississippi extended so far to the northward as to be intersected by a line to be drawn due west from the lakes of the woods, in the manner mentioned in the Treaty of Peace, it is agreed that measures shall be taken for making a joint survey of the said river from 1 degree of latitude below the falls of St. Anthony to the principal source or sources of the said river, and also of the parts adjacent thereto, and that if on the result of such survey it should appear that the said river would not be intersected by such a line as is above mentioned, the two parties will thereupon proceed by amicable negotiation to regulate the boundary line in that quarter. Article 5. Whereas doubts have arisen what river was truly intended under the name of the river St. Croix, mentioned in the said Treaty of Peace and forming a part of the boundary therein described, that question shall be referred to the final decision of the commissioners to be appointed. The said commissioners shall, by a declaration under the hands and seals, decide what river is the river St. Croix intended by the treaty, and both parties agree to consider such decision as final and conclusive, so as that the same shall never thereafter be called into question, or made the subject of dispute or differences between them. Article 6. Whereas it is alleged by divers British merchants and others His Majesty's subjects that debts to a considerable amount, which were bona fide contracted before the peace, still remain owing to them by citizens or inhabitants of the United States, and that by the operation of various lawful implements shall the peace, not only the full recovery of the said doubts has been delayed, but also the value and security thereof have been, in several instances, impaired and lessened, so that the ordinary course of judicial proceedings the British creditors cannot now obtain, and actually have and receive full and adequate compensation for the losses and damages which they have thereby sustained. It is agreed that in all such cases where full compensation for such losses and damages cannot, for whatever reason, be actually obtained, had and received by the said creditors in the ordinary course of justice, the United States will make full and complete compensation for the same to the said creditors, but it is distinctly understood that this provision is to extend to such losses only as have been occasioned by the lawful impediments aforesaid. Article 7. Whereas complaints have been made by divers merchants and others, citizens of the United States, that during the course of the war in which His Majesty is now engaged, they have sustained considerable losses and damage by reason of irregular or illegal captures or condemnations of their vessels and other property, under color of authority or commissions from His Majesty, and that from various circumstances belonging to the said cases, adequate compensation for the losses and damages so sustained cannot now be actually obtained, had and received by the ordinary course of judicial proceedings, it is agreed that in all such cases where adequate compensation cannot, for whatever reason, be now actually obtained, and had and received by the said merchants and others in the ordinary course of justice, full and complete compensation for the same will be made by the British government to the said complainants, but it is distinctly understood that this provision is not to extend to such losses or damages as have been occasioned by the manifest delay or negligence or willful omission of the claimant. Article 10. Neither the debts due from individuals of the one nation to individuals of the other, nor shares, nor monies, which they may have in the public funds or in the public or private banks, shall ever, in any event of war or national differences, be sequestered or confiscated. Article 11. It is agreed between His Majesty's and the United States of America that there shall be a reciprocal and entirely perfect liberty of navigation and commerce between the respective people in the manner under the limitations and on the conditions specified in the following articles. Article 12, relating to the trade with the West Indies, was suspended. Article 13. His Majesty consents that the vessels belonging to the citizen of the United States of America shall be admitted and hospitably received in all the seaports and harbors of the British territories in the East Indies, and that the citizens of the said United States may freely carry on a trade between the said territories and the said United States, in all articles of which the importation or exportation respectively to or from said territories shall not be entirely prohibited. The citizens of the United States shall pay for their vessels when admitted into the said ports no other or higher tonnage duty than shall be payable on British vessels when admitted into the ports of the United States, and they shall pay no other higher duties or charges on the importation or exportations of the cargoes of the said vessels than shall be payable on the same articles when imported or exported in British vessels. But it is expressly agreed that the vessels of the United States shall not carry any of the articles exported by them from the said British territories to any port or place except to some port or place in America, where the same shall be unladen, and such regulations shall be adopted by both parties as shall from time to time be found necessary to enforce the due and faithful observance of this stipulation. It is also understood that the permission granted by this article is not to extend to allow the vessels of the United States to carry on any part of the coasting trade of the said British territories, but vessels going with their own original cargoes or part thereof from one port of discharge to another are not to be considered as carrying on the coasting trade. Neither is this article to be construed to allow the citizens of the said states to settle or reside within the said territories or to go into the interior parts thereof without the permission of the British government established there. Article 14. There shall be between all the dominions of His Majesty's in Europe and the territory of the United States a reciprocal and perfect liberty of commerce and navigation. The people and inhabitants of the two countries respectively shall have liberty freely and securely and without hindrance and molestation to come with their ships and cargoes to the lands, countries, cities, ports, places, and rivers within the dominions and territories aforesaid, to enter into the same, to resort there, and to remain and reside there without any limitations of time. Also to hire and possess houses and warehouses for the purposes of their commerce, and generally the merchants and traders on each side shall enjoy the most complete protection and security for their commerce, but subject always, as to what respects this article, to the laws and statutes of the two countries respectively. Article 15. It is agreed that no other or higher duties shall be paid by the ships or merchandise of the one party in the ports of the other than such as are paid by the like vessels or merchandise of all other nations, nor shall any other or higher duty be imposed in one country on the importation of any articles, the growth, produce, or manufacture of the other, than shall be payable on the importation of the like articles, being of the growth, produce, or manufacture of any other foreign country. Nor shall any prohibition be imposed on the exportation or importation of any articles to or from the territories of the two parties respectively, which shall not equally extend to all other nations. The two parties agree to treat for the more exact equalization of the duties on the respective navigation of their subjects and people in such manner as may be most beneficial to the two countries. In the interval, it is agreed that the United States will not impose any new or additional tonnage duties on British vessels, nor increase the now subsidizing difference between the duties payable on the importation of any articles in the British or in the American vessels. Article 17. It is agreed that in all cases where vessels shall be captured or detained, or just suspicion having on board enemy property, or of carrying to the enemy any of the said which are contraband of war, the said vessel shall be brought to the nearest and most convenient port, and if any property of the enemy should be found on board such vessel, that part only which belongs to the enemy shall be made prize, and the vessel shall be at liberty to proceed with the remainder without any impediment. Article 9. That more abundant care may be taken from the security of the respective subjects and citizens of the contracting parties, and to prevent their suffering injuries by means of war or privateers of either party, all commanders of ships of war and privateers and all others, the said subjects and citizens, shall forbear doing any damage to those of the other party, or committing any outrage against them, and if they act to the contrary, they shall be punished, and shall also be bound in their persons and estates to make satisfaction and reparation for all damages and the interest thereof, of whatever nature the said damages may be. Article 22. It is expressly stipulated that neither of the said contracting parties will order or authorize any acts of reprisal against the other on complaints of injuries or damages until the said party shall first have presented to the other a statement thereof, verified by competent proof and evidence, and demanded justice and satisfaction, and the same shall either have been refused or unreasonably delayed. Article 26. If at any time a rupture should take place, which God forbid, between His Majesty and the United States, the merchants and others of each of the two nations residing in the dominions of the other shall have the privilege of remaining and continuing their trade, so long as they behave peacefully and commit no offense against the laws. And in case their conduct should render them suspected, and the respective government should think proper to order them to remove, the term of 12 months from the publication of the order shall be allowed them for that purpose to remove with their families, effects, and property. But this favor shall not be extended to those who shall act contrary to the established laws. Article 26. It is agreed that the first 10 articles of this treaty shall be permanent, and that subsequent articles, except the 12th, shall be limited in the duration to 12 years. Thank you for joining us for our primary source today on the appendix. We will see you in the stacks.